situated here. Sorry for the delay. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Can you guys see all that?
I can see it, Michael.
All right, great.
All right.
So hi, everybody. I'm sorry for the delay. I'm Michael Kirby. I'm from Within3, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Ray Mankonski from the Nemetz group. And what we're going to do for the next couple of minutes is talk to you specifically about virtual engagement and how pharma companies over the last year in particular have adapted to what we've been calling the new normal, which hopefully won't be the normal in the next few months. But what people have really discovered, Ray being one of them, is that virtual engagement using asynchronous communication like we offer on our platform is a really impactful way to bring stakeholders together in a very, very challenging time. So for those of you who are used to, always meeting at live meetings, that's obviously sort of the standard go-to in pharma, and people are used to that and comfortable with that. But obviously for the last year, that has not been an option. So what most people have shifted to initially are webcasts, like live virtual engagements like we're having right now on this platform, which allows you to have face-to-face virtually interaction with people. But it really still presents challenges in terms of technology and time zones and different geographies and things of that nature. So what our platform offers as a quasi-alternative to live virtual interaction is the ability to engage people over a period of time. So a virtual ad board, let's say, might be 10 to 14 days. And the advantage of that is essentially to give people the opportunity to participate on their schedules when it is convenient for them, instead of asking them to get in front of their laptops for 4 hours and watch some sort of didactic presentation, which in the reality that we're living in right now, that's a very challenging proposition for a lot of people. So what we're going to talk about today is the whole idea of virtual engagement and the benefits of it, the value of it, and the advantages of it. And we're going to touch upon some of these issues when we get into our conversation with Ray. So for background, Ray has worked with me at a number of different companies that he's been at, setting up virtual platforms at those companies. And so what we're going to do is talk to Ray about what his experience has been, what his observations have been, particularly over the last year, in terms of how virtual engagement has become such a major factor in life science business activities. So Ray, thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
So what we want to talk about really are just a couple of things, and specifically, obviously, virtual engagement has evolved dramatically over the last year and has become much more ubiquitous, not only in our culture, but in our particular industry. What have you seen to be the biggest changes over the past 12 or 13 months around how companies are engaging stakeholders?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I think everybody has been impacted by the way we engage with folks, KOLs and HCPs who may be, more in the community setting. And it's been a real challenge. And I think in the first 3 months, 4 months of last year, we were all struggling to figure out how we were going to maintain the same level of connectedness and relationships and advisory board type settings and other types of group engagements were one of those. And I remember thinking early on during the pandemic, it would be great if at the end of a year, when we hopefully get out of it, we can look backward at the kinds of things that we did differently and ask ourselves, has business that had been done in the years before always the best way to do things? And is this opportunity a way to learn new skills about interacting and learn new platforms? I think the interesting thing that I've learned using the asynchronous platform in the past, and certainly now in this environment, is that it really isn't a far departure from stuff that we already do in KOL engagement. I mean, for example, most of the global KOLs I interact with, I do so over email, or I do so over group emails, or I do so over Zoom. So that hasn't been, a huge departure. And most of us in our ordinary lives interact with each other in a virtual sort of asynchronous platform on Twitter and Facebook and things of that nature. So what I think we learned in this period of time is that we already had a lot of tools that we needed to be able to interact with a group of KOLs in a fashion that was meaningful and allowed us to bring a lot of our business objectives together. And that this platform, already kind of existed as a way to do that and sort of amplified the use. And I think along the way, we've also learned a lot of other things that we can do with the platform that I think we'll talk about a little bit later, that we've managed to do, and the creativity that we've all had to sort of adopt in this pandemic.
Absolutely. So, I mean, obviously a lot of people, when they're not familiar with virtual engagement or asynchronous engagement in particular, they wonder whether or not having these kind of like what they call Facebook or LinkedIn type discussions on a platform over a period of time can be as impactful as either a live meeting or even a live webcast face-to-face kind of discussion.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Disagree?
I would mostly disagree. I think that there are definitely some times and some instances where the face-to-face is pretty good as a starting point. And I think for most of the engagements that we've had, when there were a group of folks who did not know each other, a best practice was always to find some way to get everyone together for 45 minutes or an hour to kind of set that rapport and that tone, which was going to take place over the next 2 weeks or so forth over virtual interactions. But many of the advisory boards that I've done, live or virtual, whatever, you're working with global KOLs who already know each other really well, and they're already interacting over email and group chats and so forth really well. And so you don't get the dinner the night before, but you do get a lot of people who are already used to conversing, deliberating, disagreeing behind email, so to speak, or behind a platform like this. But I actually think that what this platform did, and I realized this only maybe after my second or third time of using it, is that it offers a lot of more equity for the voices in the advisory board, and it allows for a lot more engagement. I think, we've all been to the 6:30 a.m. ASCO, fourth day ad board where everyone is kind of burned out and tired and, just want to get home. And you don't always get the same level of engagement of everyone in that, that first 4 hours or so. The virtual platform, because it occurs over a couple of weeks, has allows you to kind of bring people in to that. And I remember a specific example at one company where we brought together a group of world-renowned experts and a couple of up-and-coming KOLs. And, they said afterwards, I really had a chance to kind of have my voice be heard rather than be talked over by some of the experts who have been doing this for a long time and who maybe knew each other better. And that was a good way to bring them in. I think the other thing that this does in terms of equity and share of voice for the people that you bring into one of these asynchronous meetings is that you can have sidebars. So, there would be sometimes a controversial topic, and you could see someone maybe didn't want to express their opinion fully in the meeting, but you didn't want to get it, and you wanted to follow up. And in the course of that 2 weeks or however long, you can, get back to that person and say, do you agree with this? Do you not agree with this? In a way that's, not disruptive to the group. And then the third thing that I think is about being as meaningful is that everyone and their cousin wants to go to a live ad board, right? And there are definitely parameters around how many people can show up, how many people from the commercial teams, for example, are permitted to attend, what they can say, what can they not. And these platforms allow an opportunity for people to kind of see what's going on, more people to see what's going on, more people to provide feedback, and more people to step in halfway through a conversation and say, have we thought about this? Have we not thought about that? Whereas in a live venue, you might not get that opportunity.
That's a great point. And I think to your point about inclusion, one of the things that we hear a lot from our clients about the platform is that it gives them the ability to bring more voices to the table through the asynchronous engagement. So you can have somebody on, you can have somebody in the meeting from Japan and from South America and from, Canada, and there can be, diverse audiences engaging in the meeting at the same time, without having to deal with time zones and geography and a lot of, complicated technology to help make that happen. And the other point that you made that I think is really important to focus on is this idea that everybody's got an equal share of voice. So we've all been in live meetings where there's a dominant KOL that kind of hijacks the conversation. That never happens in our online meetings because everybody's got an equal share of voice, and it really levels the playing field across egos and personalities by giving everybody an equal opportunity to contribute and react.
And the other thing I would add to that too, Michael, and I think back to when I did my first ad board when I was, partly on vacation in North Carolina, was that you have an opportunity to think a little bit more about what you say, or if you're about to quote a paper, you can actually go back to the paper and make sure that you remember the details of it correctly before you, submit your response. So that element of being able to have a little more time is for your answers. I think helps the interaction a lot. Absolutely.
So the next logical question then becomes, you've seen activities that work really, really well, interacting asynchronously. So can you provide a couple of examples of that?
Yeah. So outside of the sort of advisory boards we mentioned, I was once in an engagement around protocol development, and we needed critically an answer soon in a limited amount of time, and we needed to get a bunch of people around the table. And this, another interaction I can think of is one where sort of data is emerging and questions are emerging as you go. And in this one particular instant, we would present some ideas around the protocol and what the design would be and who the patient population would be. And KOL would ask a question, well, what about X, Y, and Z in the population you've studied? And if you're in a live ad board, you may or may not know the answer. But in the asynchronous environment, you can say, that's a good question. Let me get back to my biostatistician, and we'll run those analyses, and we'll come back to you, tomorrow or the next day or something like that, which is just not possible in a regular advisory board type of setting. And when you have a time frame too of a couple weeks, you can get through everything. I think another one that I can think of where it's best suited for overtime and asynchronous interaction. On the one side, there's this the small specific question, but we've all been involved in advisory boards where you have 100 slides and you get through 60 of them. And there's always kind of this, I wish we had that, or we only had 10 minutes to talk about this, for example. And this is in terms, I can think of also the publication planning effort, right, where you've got time to explore all the different, ideas that you may have in a less than limited time. So if something comes up halfway through an advisory board that's live, and you want to go in that direction, but you got 60 other slides to cover, you're kind of stuck, and then you have to reconvene or talk to people offline. In the asynchronous environment, you can add another question, or you can tee that up somewhere else and say that was an interesting thread. Let's start a new topic. Let's start a new thread on that. So I think it also, again, publications is one example where as you're developing something and you're up against a timeline, for example, and things start to go in a couple of different directions, that you have the opportunity to be more flexible than you would if you had, everyone in a conference room before the rest of their day at a congress.
Those are great points, Ray. Thank you. Thanks for providing those examples. So I guess the last question that we want to focus on is really, how do you understand the value of asynchronous communication? You see benefit in shifting some of your activities towards that kind of venue. How do you operationalize that?
It gets easier the more places I go to do it,
right?
And to bring this technology on. And obviously I've seen this platform in larger companies, certainly in smaller companies. It's just it's been around a long time before COVID. There's definitely a sort of initial inertia for a company that's new to it that you sort of need to establish. So the first thing I would say is when you're thinking about engagement plans with KOLs, this is something you bring into the broader engagement plan, right? How are we going to engage? Who are we going to engage? What do we need to engage on? And then what are the tools that we're going to use to do that engagement? Some of that might be in person. Some of that might be virtual. And so deciding what your overarching strategic goals are for the engagement plan is the best place to start. And then how does this technology allow you to either do that or do more? I mean, just from an operational budget perspective, you can do 3 ad boards, or you can do an ad board and 5 or 6 or 7 virtual engagements. So you always kind of put that in the mix when you're planning your budget on any given year. There is a little bit of lift at the beginning, as you know. So for people who are interested in adopting this, you do spend a little time speaking to your compliance colleagues and your IT colleagues and other parts of the organization, just to kind of help them understand, how it works, to make sure the compliance parameters are all in place and what you have to do to start engaging people. But once you kind of get over that, and it's really not that heavy a lift, but once you kind of get there, then it just sort of rolls seamlessly.
Yeah, and I think to that point, as you said, we've been around. Within 3 has been around for about 13 years now, but it's really been over the past few years that the company has really kind of taken off in terms of industry adoption, and obviously in the last year that trajectory has increased significantly. But the good news around that is that we're now working with all of the top 20 global pharma companies and probably 100 plus more device, diagnostic, pharma, and biotech. So pretty much everybody at this point has either heard of the platform or used the platform, and that makes adoption and understanding of the platform generally go a lot quicker.
Well, and as you know, I was a skeptic, Michael, 4 years ago when you presented this idea to me. I felt like I was taking kind of a chance, and then the first engagement went so well, and I think I learned certainly some best practices. You all have learned some best practices along the way. I think over the years that I'm now obviously I'm on this call much more an enthusiast than a skeptic for the technology.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I don't know if anybody has any questions. Dario, I don't know if you want to share anything that you're seeing. And if not, we will wrap this up. So thank you, everybody, for your time and attention, and stay safe, stay healthy, and enjoy your rest of your conference.
All right. Thank you.